Frontier.
Okay, it's time for another one last match as we allow footballers to replay their very last game. I'm Mark Benstead, and every week we shine the spotlight on a legend of football. Yep, this week is no exception as well, as we welcome former Manchester United stalwart Gary Pallister. But first, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Who Knows Wins, who are changing the way that you get to enjoy sport. It's the social sporting app that allows you to make your predictions in a league against your friends, your family, your colleagues, well, absolutely anyone. And that is with real money on the line as well. Or, of course, you can join one of their public leagues as you pit your wits against the Who Knows Wins community, which now has over 10,000 players. You can download the Who Knows Wins app on the App Store or Google Play and get a piece of over the £250,000 that's been won so far. So put your money where your mates are, and who knows, wins. But for now, let's kick off Gary Pallister's One Last Match. Hello and welcome to One Last Match. This is the show where we give our favourite former players of the recent past the chance to reimagine their final game. We give them the chance to pull on the boots one last time. My guest on this edition of the show, well, won pretty much everything. At one stage, he was the most expensive player for Man United, the second most expensive player in British football. He went on to help Alex Ferguson then win his first trophy as Man United boss. 4 league titles, FA Cups along the way, the League Cup, the Super Cup, and pretty much everything along the way. He was also a PFA Player of the Year. It is the former defender, Gary Pallister. Gary, great to have you with us. So many highs across the course of a career. We'll hopefully touch on plenty of them through the course of the show. We'll also reimagine your final game, give you the perfect send-off. But we start by actually focusing on your actual last game. What are your memories of the last time you played, the last time you pulled the shirt on?
Not an awful lot. I know it was at Old Trafford, which you think I would actually remember. But it was a defeat, and defeats didn't really tend to stay in the memory bank for too long. So we got beat 2-1 at Old Trafford, and the following week the back injury that I'd been nursing for probably 4 or 5 years blighted the end of my career. Eventually sort of gave up on me, and I ended up having an operation on my back, and basically that was the reason why the career came to an end. I was 35 coming up 36, so it's kind of back then it was that kind of age where you'd retire anyway possibly, so frustrating for it to end like that with injury, but you know, if you reach 36 years of age playing football, then you've enjoyed some good years.
It was back at Old Trafford obviously, but not playing for Manchester United. It was Middlesbrough who you were with.
I was with Middlesbrough, yeah, and I think we got beat 2-1. So I obviously I didn't know it was going to be my last game. It wasn't coming to the end of the season. I decided to retire. It was forced through injury, and so you weren't going into that game thinking, oh, this is the last time I'm ever going to put on a shirt. But what a great place for me to actually do it.
This show is about reimagining your farewell game, giving you the perfect send-off to a career. Part of that is I asked you where you would want your final game to have been. I guess it might actually be where it was. It might be Old Trafford.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I was very fortunate. I had a very eventful career at Middlesbrough before I eventually left for Old Trafford. And then obviously, you know, the trophies that we won, the team that I played in, the kind of football that we played. It was just 9 great years at Old Trafford. And then go back to Middlesbrough as well. That kind of, you know, I mean, it was a nice ending for me as well. I wanted to win something back at my old club. So yeah, when I'm looking at places to finish against my old club, and at Old Trafford, you know, it probably ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, we'll give you Old Trafford as a stadium, then we'll stick with that. If you had to pick a team to play in your final game.
Apart from Middlesbrough.
Apart from, yeah, a team to line up against.
I don't know. Do you know what? I never played against Real Madrid when I was at United, and I think you look at the 2 biggest clubs in the world, and I think it's Manchester United and Real Madrid. You can maybe chuck Barcelona in there, but as entities and the following around the world, I think they're the two the biggest. So I would have liked to have probably had Real Madrid as an opponent. I did play against them for Middlesbrough in a pre-season friendly in Gibraltar of all places, but never actually played against them in a competitive game.
Middlesbrough, Real Madrid in Gibraltar, that kind of happened too many times.
No, it was a bit bizarre, I must admit. Not great memories of it. I think Raul played in that game. I think Roberto Carlos might have played in that game. It wasn't their full squad, but yeah, it was a bizarre pre-season when we were told we were going to play Real Madrid in Gibraltar. So I don't know whether they were using that as a training base. I couldn't imagine Middlesbrough using it as a training base. So yeah, we ended up over there playing a game.
Because you've got your opposition, you've got your stadium. We'll get to your team in just a second to line up alongside you for the final match. You have to get to your final game. There's the bus journey from the team hotel. If you had to pick one of your teammates, of all the guys you played with, to sit with you on the bus going to the stadium, who would it be? They don't necessarily need to play. So if you want to, this is a chance to bring in one of the good guys who perhaps wasn't one of the absolute superstars. It's up to you, though.
Oh, man. I mean, you make so many friends. I mean, there's a thing in football, you have acquaintances and teammates. But, you do have friends and you have good friendships with people still. My mate Bernie Slaven from Middlesbrough was a laugh a minute. I mean, the amount of times when we were out together, going out socialising, and people thought he was drunk, and he was teetotal. It tells you a lot about the kind of character that he was. He was always like mischievous, laughing, joking around. If I wanted to talk about the game, I'd be sitting with Tony Mowbray, my centre-half partner from Middlesbrough, who loves talking about football, or Brucey. You know what I mean? We had so many good nights out together with our partners as well. Sharpie the same, went on holiday with Sharpie and his missus, and good friendships from so probably you permanent one from them four, I guess.
It's a pretty good group to have on the bus. In terms of the bus journeys, what are your memories? Were you a good traveller to games, or did you hate that, or was that part of the whole experience for you?
I was in a card school with a gaffer. Now, when you see a card school in this day and age, you start thinking, oh no, there's thousands of pounds in the pool here, and there's all these stories about the gambling in the England squad or different squads and people. We used to play a game called Hearts, where you chase the leader, and the manager would play, Brian McClare would play, Steve Bruce, myself. So there was and you only four could play at a time. So the gaffer might drop somebody so he couldn't get in the card school, so he could get a place. But yeah, I mean that was generally the way I travelled. We used to go down to London on a bus, which would be 3.5 to 4 hours journey down to London from Manchester, and we'd spend that time playing cards at the back of the bus. So. It was always interesting when you're playing with a gaffer, because in the game of hearts you have to chase the leader, and if he's leader you have to give him the worst cards. So and I used to be always the one that passed it. I think the lads always made sure I had to pass him the cards. So the amount of times he called me worse than whatever is you wouldn't believe. But I mean, he was such a sore loser, and I think that tells you all you need to know about a gaffer. He was. People say what a great win he was. He was such a sore loser, and many a time we've seen the cards get thrown across the card table because he'd lost at the very last moment of the game. But it passed the time really quickly, and I think that was another one of the and it was small potatoes what you're playing for. So I quite enjoyed travelling down.
You mentioned the gaffer, Sir Alex Ferguson. I give you the chance to pick a manager to manage your team for this final game. I presume it will be him, or obviously you've worked for some fantastic managers across your career as well, aside from him, especially for England, of course.
Yeah, and listen, I think Terry Venables was fantastic. I think in that time I went and played for England under Terry. I think you felt a real togetherness within that squad. I didn't make the 96 final squad because of injury, and Terry took them on to, they should have got to the final, and who knows what would have happened then. But Terry was fantastic. Really, the players loved his man management style. They loved the way he wanted to play football. He was very good in the way he put his messages across, very good on the coaching side of things. He was absolutely excellent. And then I had him, unfortunately, he came to Middlesbrough in my last 6 months. But I was injured by then. My back had gone. But he helped Brian Robson save Middlesbrough from relegation. But ultimately, yes, Alex. He going in there and meeting him for the first time and working with him and dealing with him and seeing how he operated and seeing how he managed people was incredible to watch. He was, he was tough, but he's understanding. I think that's a side of maybe the manager a lot of people don't see. But ultimately, he took me on a great adventure. And then 9 years at Old Trafford to win the first Premier League after 26 years. Adventures in Europe, FA Cups, which as a kid is what you dream of playing in. I managed to play in 4, lost 1, won 3. So yeah, he's obviously the man I've managed in my side.
What was it like to meet him for the first time, or to be a Man United player under him for the first time, rather, the first day on training?
I got a little bit of leeway in the first couple of games because I gave away a penalty on my debut against Norwich. We got beat 2-0 at home, and if I'd have been there longer, I'd probably got the so-called hairdryer at the end of that game. My second game, we went on and we played on the Saturday. We beat that Norwich game was a midweek game. We played Millwall on the Saturday, beat them 5-1, and I'm thinking, well, this is what Old Trafford's all about. We go and we batter teams and we score lots of goals, entertain, and so we go into the following week and we play Man City in the derby at City, and we get done 5-1. So it wasn't the most auspicious of starts, that's for sure, and it took a while, but I eventually did see the hairdryer in full flow, and it was a difficult start in my career there, and a difficult start to that season for Man United. That in that end of that season, we nearly went into the relegation zone. I know they talk about bad times now and how tough it is. I think we were going into a game in April that season, and if we'd have lost at Millwall, I think we'd have found ourselves in the bottom 3. We managed to win the game and steer ourselves well clear of relegation by the end of the season, but it was a tough year.
There was a lot of talk during that season about the pressure he was under. Was his job under threat? That obviously will hold up the cup game at Forest. Did you get a sense of that as players, that there was a question mark around him, or do you think?
Well, we'd seen. I think it was a couple of banners at Old Trafford, sort of saying enough's enough, and it wasn't nice to see. It was all over the press. You couldn't ignore it. We were quite aware of what was going on. Then to get the third round draw away at Forest, you're like, it couldn't get much tougher because Forest were a really good side back then. So there was a lot of talk about if he did lose the game, then ultimately he'd been sacked. And I think Jimmy Hill was commentating on the game or doing the build up to the game, and he came out with the statement that we looked beat in the warm-up, and I don't know if it was the gaffer who came into the dressing room or whether it was Archie Knox. I'm not sure who. Somebody came in and told the lads that that's what had been said. So they used it as something to motivate you, if you like, drive you on that little bit more. And I think it had a desired effect because we went on to win the game 1-0, and went on to save our season by winning the FA Cup. But I've since spoke to the likes of Sir Bobby, spoke to Martin Edwards, who was the chairman then, and they've all said he would have heaped a lot of pressure on, but they could see what he was doing behind the scenes at Old Trafford, how he changed the dynamic of the football club, especially with the scouting system, and they were starting to bring in the best talent from on its own doorstep, which apparently had lapsed. So they could see him building it from the foundations to to the first team. So, you know, I don't believe he would have been sacked, and you know what I've been told is that he wouldn't. But I mean, he would have heaped a lot more pressure on him, I guess.
You finished 13th in the league that season, I think, but you did win the FA Cup.
Yeah.
What did that first trophy win do for that whole group? Because it was the first one that obviously Alex had won it.
Well, the gaffer had always said that, you know, you win a trophy and it breeds confidence, and it's a starter for going on to be more successful, and that's how it turned out to be. We played every game away from home. We played at obviously Forest, and I think it was Hereford. Then we went to Newcastle, I think it was. I think there's another game in there somewhere before we played Oldham. Or is that for? We played Oldham in the semis, which went to a replay, and then obviously Pallister in the final, which went to a replay as well. Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember the Hereford game being a really hard slog. The Newcastle game 3-2. Oldham. They were all really tough games. And we got to the final and just managed to get the equaliser 5 minutes before end of extra time to take us to another replay. But it gives, the FA Cup was much bigger then than it is possibly now. You know, you see teams take liberties with the FA Cup. You certainly didn't. It was a big trophy, a massive trophy then, and you know, that was a big thing for Manchester United to win it at the end of the season, given the state of our league form as well. So we used that as a catalyst to go forward into the next couple of seasons.
So Sir Alex Ferguson is your manager. Then we'll get to your team. In goal, who have you gone through? Of all the great goalkeepers you played with, mentioned Les Sealey, Jim Leighton so far. You played with plenty of guys for England as well. Who have you gone for?
Well, I'll tell you another great keeper I go, and people will go, maybe not remember, Stephen Pears, who I played with at Middlesbrough. I think he'd have been an even better goalkeeper if he had 10 fingers, but he only had 9.5. He came from Manchester United when I was already at Middlesbrough, and he was exceptional. I've got to say, he was an exceptional goalkeeper. I'm thinking he was about 5'11", 6 foot, great reflexes, would command his box, would talk. He eventually did get England. He got called up into an England squad, and I think he got injured, if I remember, and he didn't actually get to join up. But that's how good he was. And I think if he'd have played for a bigger club, he would have actually. I'm sure he would have played for England, because he was right out at the top draw. But obviously, I can't look past Peter Schmeichel. I think for 5 or 6 years, I think he was the best goalkeeper in the world. I mean, he changed the dynamics of goalkeeping, the way he used to. He was a handball goalkeeper back in Denmark, and he took some of the traits out of that into his actual goalkeeping. And his style was a little bit different to every other goalkeeper. He would come out and make himself as big as possible and really lunge it and try and scare the centre forward if he's through one-on-one. And he was just a huge frame. He was very agile for a big guy. You know, I think initially when he first came in, I think he was a little bit surprised by the physical side of the Premier League. I remember, I think it was Leeds and Wimbledon caused him a few raised eyebrows in his early part because he was getting clattered, which probably didn't happen in Denmark. But he soon adjusted to it, and I think we realised straight away what a great goalkeeper we had on our hands, and he was a formidable last line of defence, and he wasn't a bad footballer either outside when he used to join in a five-a-side, because he didn't like playing in goal in a five-a-side, and he would join in and think he was a bit of a centre forward and try and bully me and Brucey as centre halves. But yeah, his reflexes for such a big guy, his dominance. Obviously, everybody remembers him shouting, screaming, and you know, trying to G up his back four or whatever. And for that, I think, yeah, as I say, 5 or 6 years, I think he was a standout goalkeeper in the world.
Peter's arrival was 91-92. It was also, I think, Ryan Giggs' kind of breakthrough season. Was his addition, Peter's addition, did that, I mean, he finished second in the end, but did that kind of help set the foundations in place that you felt you were a team heading towards eventually winning the league at that point?
Yeah, because, you know, straight away with Peter, you realised that this guy was a real deal. He was a little bit different. He was very confident, maybe arrogant, you could call it. But he give you, you know what I mean, he give you that belief. And that's what, as a centre-half, I think it's very important that you have that kind of, that you can rely on your goalkeeper, like you could rely on Peter. He would come through and eventually just clatter everybody and take the ball. It didn't matter whether you got whacked, you knew Big Peter was going to come for it. So I think goalkeeper is, you know, it's such a hard position, I think, that once you get, as we found out when Peter went, United struggled for a period of time to find a goalkeeper until they found Van der Sar. So I think for a successful club, I think goalkeeper is one of the most important positions. Yeah.
Peter Schmeichel in goal then. Let's get to your back four. We know you're in it. Full-backs, right back, who do you go for?
Right back, I've went for Gary Neville. Paul Parker was also terrific at in the right back position. Viv Anderson was exceptional in that position as well, and it was probably between Viv and Gary. I mean, Viv won European Cups and, you know, came to United, and I thought he was a tremendous player. But Gary, because of, I guess, what he's won, how he adapted himself, because he came through the 92 class, if you like, as a centre-half. But he was deemed to be not big enough, because I think Gary's 5'10". Or maybe I'm doing him a favour there, maybe he's 5'9", I don't know. But he adapted into the role as right back, and Gary's attitude to the game was top class. He said it himself, he didn't have the, do you know what I mean, maybe the talent that other players had. But he was so desperate to do well, and he made himself into a fantastic right back. He had a great relationship, obviously, with Bex. They were good mates off the pitch. I think that helped him go on to bigger and better things on the pitch. But he learned to be an attacking fullback, which I don't think was natural, and Gary was very much a defender. And he learned how to be an attacking fullback, and he learned how to cross the ball, and he learned how to work in tandem with Bex. And he served Manchester United and England absolutely fantastic for a number of years.
A lot of big characters in that Man United squad through those years. Was Gary, even then when he first came into the team, was he confident enough to be kind of a voice and to make his opinion count, or did that grow?
No, I think that would have grown. When Nev first got into the side, yeah, you'd probably still have Brucey there, Sparky there, Chucky there, Cantona there, Keane there, myself, Schmeichel. Do you know what I mean? You're never going to be a voice in that dressing room. You know what I mean? But I think, obviously, as Gary developed and the elder players left, and you were looking at somebody to be the next voice of the changing room, and Gary was the natural successor for that. Kind of once Keane left, that Gary was going to be the one who would be in charge of the dressing room. And you didn't see that in his early days, but not in the first team environment. You could see that in his own environment, that he was the guy that they all kind of listened to, and the voice of common sense. I'm not sure Buddy and Scholes, he maybe saw it like that, because they were a bit more mischievous than Gary was. But you could see he was the football man. He was going to be the leader of that generation.
He's your right back. Across the other side of the field, then left back. Who are you going to go for?
Left back. There's a few again there. I played with Colin Cooper at Middlesbrough. Went on to play for England. But then again, he played centre half for a while as well. I played with him in the reserves when I was coming through at Middlesbrough. And he played sweeper behind me, and he was a really good reader of the game. I played with Piercy for England, who, you know, everybody knows about Piercy. No nonsense, great energy, a talker, a leader of a football team. So he was fantastic to play alongside. But ultimately, I spent many years with Dennis Irwin, right-footed left back, and Dennis was, you know, the manager called him Mr. Consistent. Very rarely had a bad game. And could take penalties, could take free kicks, corners. Very good in open play. Defended really well, very intelligent defending. Obviously, I played left side centre back for most of my career at Manchester United, so I was alongside Dennis for large periods of my career, and just so reliable. We kind of knew each other inside out as well. So yeah, I think he's been voted Manchester United's best ever left back. So I wouldn't disagree with that. He was an absolute joy to play alongside, and a fantastic player.
Phenomenal player. You've got your full-backs. You're in the team. Who's partnering you at the centre half?
Well, Brucey won't thank me for this, but I think I played with. I played with Tony Mowbray at Middlesbrough. It was fantastic for me to play alongside. Great determination, again, leader. Very much in the Steve Bruce mould. They both didn't have great pace, but never really got caught with that because they read the game so well. So they were both massive influences in my career. And like I say, when I left Middlesbrough to go to Manchester, I felt as though I had somebody very much like Tony alongside me. And Brucey was fantastic. Should have played for England. I think he got kind of pigeonholed to be an old-fashioned type centre-half, but you ever watch clips of Brucey, far better than that. Could time a tackle, could play out. His passing was really good for supposedly an old-fashioned centre-half. Tough as all boots, and great to play alongside. And then went on to my England career and played alongside Des Walker, who, you heard the chant, "You'll never beat Des Walker," and that's what he was like. Might not have been the most comfortable with the ball at his feet, but you just couldn't get past Des. He was fantastic, brave as well. But ultimately, I think the player of the centre half of my generation was probably Tony Adams, who I played alongside a few times with England. Again, that Brucey, Tony Mowbray kind of leadership qualities. You'd follow Tony into battle, if you like, and he was. I thought he was a great lad. Read the game well, tough, had a bit of pace as well, but just a natural defender. Could win the ball aerially. He could read the game. He wasn't too bad at passing the ball out from the back as well. So for me, the most all-round defender of my generation, who I played with a few times with England, was Tony.
Big co-mate. Steve Bruce doesn't go in alongside you. Tony
I
Adams
know.
is
I apologise to Brucey, but I've said many times that, I mean, it's horrible saying that because we were good friends, and I think you try to be completely honest. I'm sure. And I know Alex tried to buy Tony as well, I think, in his day as Manchester United manager. So, but Brucey, Brucey was awesome. He really, and there's a story there with we played against Benfica one night in a pre-season. Oh no, it was a mid-season game to celebrate Benfica's. I think they were opening a new stadium. We went out and played there, and Sir Bobby Robson was managing Benfica, and we played the game, and it was Cantona's first game he played for Manchester United. He came on as sub in this friendly game, and afterwards Bobby Robson came to our hotel where we were having a couple of jars in the bar after the game, and he walked in and said, "The man's can have a chat with your boys," and Gaffer introduced Sir Bobby, and he just said, "Look lads, I just want to have a moment of your time, just because I just want to say sorry to Steve Bruce because I really should have given him an England cap. You're so well worth an England cap. I just want to apologise for not giving you one," which was great for Steve to hear that. It didn't probably ease the pain of not playing for England, but I think that told you an awful lot about what really great managers thought about Steve Bruce.
To your midfield then, Gary. So many midfielders to pick from. It's almost impossible task.
Yeah. Well, I've changed it a couple of times now.
Who's got in? Who's made the cut?
Well, I'll start with the best player I think I ever played with. And that's Brian Robson. I made my England debut. Brian Robson was playing midfield. I was a young kid. I was not long out of non-league football. Came out of non-league football at 19. Made my debut for Middlesbrough at 20. And at 22 I'm making my debut for England. And I was what is now as the Championship. I'd never played in the top flight. and I'm going out and playing for England in the NEP Stadium, Budapest, against Hungary. And you know what I mean? I'm thinking, dear God, how's this arrived here that I'm actually playing for my country? And I always remember Brian Robson coming and talking to me and chatting to me and, you know, do this, you know what I mean? Trying to, and basically he kind of chaperoned me through it a little bit. Tony Adams played alongside me that night, and he was I think he might have even been younger than me, Tony. But he'd obviously played in the first team at Arsenal, and he was a bigger name. But it was Brian Robson came to me, just trying to put me at ease. You know, I'll always be shown for the ball. Give it to me. Doesn't matter if I've got somebody chasing up the back of me, knock me the ball, and I'll deal with it. If I lose it, it's my fault. And I always remember that kind of conversation with him. So he made my debut really, really easy. Or easier for me. I wouldn't say it was really, really easy, but it was easier for me because of the way Brian kind of spoke to me. And then I joined him at Old Trafford, where he was the king. Do you know what I mean? Brian Robson was the biggest influence at Old Trafford. And you know, he was in control of that dressing room. He was the leader. He was the leader on the park. He was our social secretary as well when we had these team meetings. And I just saw firsthand what a player he was. Incredible captain. Made the game just look so easy. You know, you'd look at things and passes and different things, and you go, and he just made it look that simplistic. And his energy, and you know, he'd score you the goal. He'd be in front of your back four, protecting your back four. If somebody's going around kicking your players, he'd be the one who'd go and be the enforcer. He'd go and volley them and say, listen, you're not kicking. Because he'd done that on a couple of times when people like Lee Sharp or Russell Beardsmore or Lee Martin were getting, people were trying to bully him in games. He'd be like, okay. And he'd take it upon himself to go and sort that out, if you like. So I saw him, when I saw him at that period of time, I was just like in awe of the kind of ability he had. And it was very hard, I think, for the Manchester United team back then, because whenever which, you know, he did pick up a lot of injuries, although he did play a lot of games for Manchester United. He was a lot of time out injured, and I think we lost our way when he wasn't in the side. And I think we eventually had to learn to play without Brian Robson, and I think it took us a long time before we did, because when he came in, he really just controlled that team, if you like. Everybody thought, oh, Robbo's here today, that's all sorted. Robbo would be out the side, and it was like, right, where we go from here? Who's going to take control of this team and guide the ship, if you like? And it took us a while for us to sort that out, but you know, eventually the likes of Paul Ince, and eventually Keane came through, and that's when Brian then left the club, because we had two big characters in there. So yeah, Robbo, whenever I get asked the question, who's the best player you play with, I always plumb for Brian Robson.
Brian Robson gets in. Fantastic choice. Who else are you putting in that central middle? I think you kind of go in a 4-4-1-1 formation.
I don't know which way I'm going with it. I'm just going with the guys I think are the best kind of players that I've played with, and I think I've said it many times. I think the closest thing I saw to Robbo was Roy Keane. When he came to the club, he was very much in the image of Brian Robson. Just made the game look so simple. Full of running, box to box, aggression, an iron will, and made the game look so easy. It was incredible to watch them two operate, how they really kind of guided the teams, if you like. They were the pivotal figure in the sides that they played in. And you know, when Roy first came in, he was a little bit quieter, because you had the bigger influences in Brian, Brucey, Sparky, Chocky, Schmeichs. You know what I mean? Took him time to when he came to his sort of time to be the leader, he really embraced that and was an incredible player. And, you know, I think that the cruciate ligament injury stopped him being that box-to-box player that Robbo was throughout his career. He became more of a holding midfield player, if you like, after the injury, because he maybe quite wasn't as dynamic as what he was when he first came to the club. But incredible player. And as I say, one of them players, if he was in your side, you thought, yeah, today's going to be a good day.
He gets in. Who else do you put into your midfield then? 2 in so far.
Yeah, 2 in. I'm going to then go, and people are, if I go 4-4-2, it's whether you put Keane or Scholes in. And I've got to put Scholes in there because, I played with Scholes for, 3 years? 3 years, and saw him develop. And I thought he was going to be a 10. I thought he would have been an ideal player to take on the Cantona role. But he didn't see himself as that, and I think he fell out. I think there was a bit of a collision there between the gaffer and Scholes about where he was going to play. But the gaffer wanted him to play centre midfield. And you were looking at Scholes, you're thinking, you're very small, and when you're that small, you've got to be an exceptionally good player. And Scholes, he was an exceptionally good player. Again, I don't think I saw him. I think he developed into being that player that Zidane talks about, Xavi and Iniesta talk about. And the player he did become, but you could see it in the years that I played with him. This real special talent developing, and he learned how to look after himself. Okay, people talk about his tackling, and I don't think there was mistimed. I think Scholes just wanted to let people know he was there, because it's quite easy to get bullied in our game when you're at a bit of a height disadvantage. So he would go out there and he'd let people know he was going to get bullied around, and a lot of the time he was also alongside his mate Nicky Butt. And the two of them wouldn't take any prisoners. They were both ferocious tacklers. But he was a better timer of the tackle than Scholes was. But his ability to arrive in the box and score goals, his ability to play the right pass, his ability to strike the ball. I remember sitting down watching him we were playing in Europe. I can't remember where it was. And we finished the training session in midfield, and the attackers went off to do some shooting practice. And I think I was just sat in the middle of the centre circle with all the kit and what have you. And I was just sitting watching the lads hitting balls. And I was watching Scholes striking these footballs. And then he didn't strike a bad one. And that's the way, you look at some of the goals he scored from out of the box, how he hits different types of balls. And he was incredible at doing that. And he developed into that team that went and won the. I know he didn't play in '99, but he was a big part of that side that got to the final, and he went on to become one of the best players, in English football.
Do you think it was a mistake for him to withdraw from England so early? Should he have been a pivotal player?
I understand why he did, because they weren't trying to build a team around him. They had the conundrum of Gerrard, Lampard, and Scholes. And that choice was for the manager to make at the time, and they farmed him out onto the left-hand side. And I don't think Scholes particularly enjoyed that. I've never had the conversation with Scholes about it, but I think that's what he has talked about. And isn't it amazing when you talk about the likes of Xavi and Iniesta and Zidane talking about Paul Scholes as the toughest opponent, that he actually couldn't get into the midfield in his preferred position with England. I admire Frank Lampard and I admire Steven Gerrard. I think they were both fantastic players for the country and for the club. And I can understand the headache that the manager would have had, but I think I'd have still found a position for Scholes in the middle of the park.
We'll find out who completes Gary Pallister's midfield in just a minute. But first, let me tell you about Who Knows Wins. If you don't know it yet, Who Knows Wins is a sports app where you challenge your friends or their community on sports results. Download the app, then you can either join public leagues that they've created around things like the Premier League every weekend, or you can create your own custom league and invite your friends to play against you. You pick the fixtures you want to predict, the entry fee, and pick the winning team. Or if you want, you can go for draws for each game. The more people you have in your league, well, the bigger the pot is. And all you have to do is pick the match winners or the draws of the games you've selected. You can check out the links on Twitter at One Last Match, or just search for One Last Match on Facebook. But for now, let's settle back down and get back to Gary Pallister's One Last Match.
Your midfield is taking shape then. Working off the left, wide left, I think he'll probably end up. Who have you gone there?
Yeah, there's only one I can go for there, really, and that's Giggsy. What can you say? I first saw Giggsy at age 15. I'd only been at United a few weeks, and I was in a hotel with Incy, and we finished training one day, and the youth cup team was playing at Old Trafford. And I just remember the gaffer coming to us and saying, "Oh, if you're bored tonight, lads, the youth team's playing at Old Trafford. If you want to come along and have a watch." And so me and she went, "Yeah, we'll do that." So we went along to the game, and we sat up in the director's box, and we're sitting there watching the lads warm up, and gaffer calls us down to where he's sitting in the director's box, and he went, "Young lad tonight called Ryan Wilson," which is before he was called Ryan Giggs, and he said, "Keep an eye out for him, he's going to be a star." And I was like, me and she kind of looked at each other and went, "That's a big call." You know what I mean? He went, "Oh, the kid's still at school, he's 15, he's joining next season." And we were like, wow, for the manager to say that, you're like, God, this kid's got to be special. And so we watched him. I mean, it was, from what I remember, it was a rainy, rainy night. Giggsy was built like a pipe cleaner. His shirt was twice the size of he was. And this little skinny kid running up and down the left-hand side with balance that you were like, belied his years, really. And you're going, yeah, he looks like a player. But to say he's going to be a star, I don't think he ever said that publicly, by the way, because it would have heaped too much pressure on Ryan. And you know how well he protected him. But as soon as he came into the first team squad, he was a nightmare to play against. Viv Anderson famously called, he gave him twisted blood. I think he ended up dislocating his knee trying to challenge Giggsy in a game at the Cliff. And he was just an awesome talent, great lad. His balance to run with the ball at speed, really just every defender's worst nightmare, because he'd twist you inside and out. And went on to play 1,000 games for Manchester United, being at the very heart of that successful team through the 90s into the 2000s. And and then obviously I wasn't there when he redeveloped that sort of, he became a midfield player, and his football brain could cope with that. He learned how to be a central midfield player, and a genius, great kid, scorer of goals, scorer of great goals, and one of the best ever put on a shirt for Manchester United.
You mentioned how much the manager kind of protected him a little bit. There's a perception outside the club that there was almost a point where there was him and Lee Sharp, and he tried to look after the two, and Ryan took on board what he was doing, and maybe Lee didn't. Is that the way it worked? Do you remember a point where Ryan learned to toe the line, perhaps? Or?
Yeah, Sharpie was a little bit older than Ryan, don't forget as well, and made his first team debut probably a couple of years before Ryan did. Was known as, I do remember, Fergie's Fledglings before was the class of '92. There was Russell Beesmore, Lee Martin. Sharpie was part of that. Sharpie enjoyed life a little bit. No, I'm not saying Ryan didn't, because they famously got caught by the manager going out for a night out somewhere in Blackpool, I think it was, and everybody knows the story about that. But I remember him playing Sharpie left and Giggsy right, or changing him round, because they were both fantastic players. I still say Sharpie's the best crosser of ball from the left hand I've seen in the game. I would actually say he was a better crosser of the ball than Giggsy. But Giggsy's everything that went with Giggsy made him the player that he was. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, Sharpie didn't leave till about '95, so he had a long career there. But the perception was that Giggsy was more prepared to be under the wing of the manager than maybe what Sharpie was.
Fabulous player to go into your team. Let's move forward then. Who else gets in
Well,
What's your
again, I
selection?
don't know where to go with it. Do I play with 2 centre forwards? I'm going to put somebody in the number 10 role. And they're both probably 2 players I'm going to pick up front are probably both better off in the number 10 role. But I'm going to start with Gaza. He could have played there. He obviously played most of his career as a centre midfield player. Gaza in his pomp before he did his cruciate. What an incredible talent. A little bit like Messi, the way he could dribble past people. And you'd wonder how he did it, because you wouldn't say he was the most lightning fast to people, but he would unbalance you as a defender and skip past you. And when you talk about geniuses in football, well, I think Gaza was a genius. I played with him at England B. I played against him, obviously, for Newcastle and for when he was at Spurs. Played with him for England B, played with him for England. He came to Middlesbrough when I joined Middlesbrough after I was at United. And the lad was a genius. The lad could do everything on a football pitch. Obviously, everything that surrounded Gaza and the story of Gaza is there for everybody to digest. But talent-wise, I think there's very few players that have had the talent of Paul Gascoigne. Not just in England, but in across the world. I'd love to have seen how much more he could have achieved if he hadn't done his cruciate. He still was a fantastic player, but I think a cruciate injury, as I saw with Roy, does affect. It does affect you. But yeah, in his pomp, at his very, very best, wow, probably one of the best players that we've seen in this country, without a shadow.
You played with Paul, as you mentioned, for England, 22 caps for your country. You played under 4 different England managers across that spell as well. How do you reflect on your international career?
Stop-start. Played under Sir Bobby, made my debut. And I remember after making my debut, which went okay, we then played in Saudi a few weeks, well, a couple of months later in a friendly. I remember because we went on Concorde, which was quite exciting at the time. And so we went over and played in Saudi, and we drew the game 1-1 over there. And I always remember him sort of saying, like, when they scored, where was Pallister and Adams? Because we were both playing. We went up for a free kick, and for whatever reason, we decided to take it short, lost the ball. Me and Tony trying to get back from going up for an advanced free kick, and just remember thinking, that's a little bit unfair because we're at the other end of the pitch. Anyway, things. It wasn't a good performance from England in the game against Saudi, and Middlesbrough got involved in the playoffs at the end of that season, and there was obviously a few friendlies before Sir Bobby named his squad for the Euros, and I couldn't play in them because I was there playing in the playoffs. So Middlesbrough went on another 3 weeks of the season. So it's right when the friendlies were going to play. So I never got a chance to play again. So ultimately, he went with the experience, and I didn't get picked in that squad. And then it was quite a while after that before I think I had to join Manchester United, and then eventually Graham Taylor brought me back into the fold. Had a few games under him, and then I think my best time with England was under Terry. In the early days, he picked myself and Tony to play as centre backs. But unfortunately for me, that season, which was Terry's first, it was the start of my back problems, and I missed a large part of that season, and I didn't feel like I could justify going to the Europe, because I felt as though I needed to take the summer to try and sort my back out. So didn't get picked in that squad, and then the fourth manager was Glenn, who I think I only played 1 game under. So it was very much a stop-start kind of international career. Very, very frustrating in the early part as well, because I was travelling all over the world. I wasn't even getting on a bench, and no matter what people say, it's great that you've selected for your country, but if you're travelling everywhere and not even getting a sniff, your frustration does take. take a hold, I guess. So I look back at my international career, and listen, you play once for your country, and you know it is an amazing experience to stand there, representing your country, playing football for what is seen as the best players in the country. Standing there in the national anthem, you've got the shirt on, the 3 lions. It doesn't matter what anybody says, there's no prouder moment than doing it. And for me, coming from non-league to arrive at that step within 2 years of making my debut, it was just a roller coaster ride to get there, and it was almost pinching myself with disbelief that I was actually going to represent my country. So, yeah, I look back at, I guess, a little bit indifferently. I feel as though I could have played more times for England, but ultimately it did become a bit of a frustrating experience for me.
To the final position in your team then, the team for your final game. Who have you gone for? So many forward players you played across. The list is almost endless. The likes of Lineker, Beardsley, all these different guys at United. Who did you pick?
Yeah, well, I have picked Cantona, and the reason being he was our final piece of the jigsaw at Manchester United. He came into a team that we felt should have won the title the year before, in the last year of the First Division. I'm sure the Leeds United players will argue against me. We had to play 4 games in 8 days. We'd asked for an extension of the league. We played something like Saturday, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, which in this day and age, you know what I mean, it's just incredible. And we basically lost the league at that period of time. We obviously then went and got Cantona from Leeds, which I always remember receiving a phone call from a journalist. You know, you just signed a centre forward, and we were linked heavily at the time with Alan Shearer and David Hurst. And he said, "You have a guess." I'm going, "Really? Have a guess who he's just." So I've obviously started off with Shearer, Hurst, and then we went through God knows how many names. And he said, "No, you signed Eric Cantona." And I went, "Wow, okay." And I played against Eric. He come on a bit of I think he came on the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes at Old Trafford in a game. I remember the gaffer asking us about Eric Cantona in the bath after the game, and myself and Bruce, he went, "Yeah, he's a good player." I said, "You know what I mean, he's big, he's bullish." I said, "But he's got great touch, you know what I mean, in a very, you know players when they're clever players and they're playing against you." I said, "Yeah," he's really, really good player." So I don't know whether it was me and Brucey saying that. The guy, I think the gaffer has said he was, he did ask me and Brucey about it. And anyway, so it was a kind of weird one because, he was sorting out the team at Leeds. I know when he came across, he had a bit of a reputation as being a bit of a bad boy. He fell out. He'd been banned, I think, from France. And that ban didn't, obviously bring into, the fact that he couldn't play abroad. So came over, had the trial at Sheffield Wednesday, wanted him to do whatever and play more games. And he went, no, and he signed for Leeds. And then you're thinking, wow, to get somebody from Leeds because of the rivalry between United and Leeds is, quite nasty at times. You didn't think that would have been possible, but yeah, when he brought him in, and Eric had a confidence about him. Again, you can maybe call it arrogance, but he had that belief in his own ability. And you watched him work day in, day out at training with Manchester United, and you saw this talent he had, and you saw the professional. I think what's one of the things that maybe surprises people, because he had the reputation of being a bit difficult, the professionalism that he brought to the club was incredible. I think the lads of 92 talk about that, how he conducted himself with his training, always there on time, always staying out after training, warming up before the warm-up, if you like, getting himself prepared to be the best that he could be. And you saw him arrive in training, you saw glimpses of him in training, but it's when he then got into the first team, Eric I saw players mentally fold with the pressure of Old Trafford and what it can do to players' psyche, mentality, whatever you want to call it. You saw Eric arrive at Old Trafford, put his collar up, walk out there like, this is me. You know what I mean? I think somebody said he was like a gladiator walking out and saying, I'm going to own this field. And he just had that awe-inspiring gift about that he was in complete control and he would make things happen for that team. And if one thing we did struggle the year before was when we did lose to Leeds, was maybe that little bit of imagination in the side. We had Giggs and Sharp and Konchelskis, but a little bit of craft was maybe missing for the side, and that's what Eric brought to the party, and he brought it big style. He was, the full. I'm not saying he was the most, the biggest part of the jigsaw, if you like, but the final part of the jigsaw, without a doubt.
I guess you can't really mention Eric without skipping on a couple of seasons to when he gets his ban, he jumps in the crowd, the kung fu kick, is it?
Yeah.
What was it like to be a part? You were on the pitch that day. That is one of the most. If you picked Premier League moments or moments in English football, that is in the top 3, 4, 5. What was it like that day?
It's disbelief. It's disbelief. But then again, you've got to. I've seen Eric walk into places, and he's been spat at, and he's been abused, and because he was the player that the supporters wanted to get at most to unsettle, and because he maybe had the volatile temperament, and players certainly went out maybe to wind him up as well. You could see Eric, the frustration in Eric growing, because he couldn't snap back if somebody spat at him. Or somebody abused him. You could see that look in his eye, and I wouldn't like to go toe to toe with Eric when he had that look in his eye. And I think that, it all built up with the sending off that night. He felt as though he'd been fouled in the first place, I think it was. And then I think he kicked out at, was it Shaw? I think, for Palace. Robert Shaw. Richard Shaw. And I think it all just boiled up in him. The frustration to get sent off, the frustration of not being there to win the game with his team, and the guy running down and verbally abusing him. I think it was just a moment where he snapped and did what he did. And it is kind of like, it's kind of shocking to see, and you're kind of shocked by it all. But behind everything, what you saw going, I saw Eric out in private circumstances where he's been abused by people, and that's a part of it you maybe didn't see. That that's what he had to take on board, and as a professional, you're supposed to sit there and take it. I think that just sent him over. The guy running down, shouting and screaming, he just thought, enough's enough, and took out his own judgment on the guy who was abusing him. And you can't do that. We all know that. But I've got more of an understanding as to why Eric did do that, and it caused him to behave like that. And I think that's another reason why Sir Alex went out and brought him back into the fold, because Eric retired from football, said, enough, I'm packing in, I'm retiring, I'm not going to. And the gaffer went out, and I think the understanding there for what Eric went through was there from the gaffer to try and bring him back in.
What was the scene like in the dressing room afterwards, though? 'Cause you draw the game in the end, you all go in. What greeted you? Was Eric there? How did the
Eric
manager
was there.
deal with?
Well, listen, I'm sure enough players have told the story of, we all thought Eric was going to get the hairdryer after the game, and after the gaffer nailed a few of the players, because we drew the game, and with 10 men. We thought we'd done okay, and he came in and he had a pop at a few of the players, and then we thought, this is Eric going to get the hairdryer. And he turned to Eric, and Eric was sat in the corner with his suit on, and he just went, Eric, he said, you can't go around doing that, son. It was the mortal line, and the gaffer doesn't like that story, I don't think. He says it didn't happen, but sorry, gaffer, it did.
What was Eric's body language at that point? Was he?
I think Eric was, I don't know really, I just remember him I think he was very much in his own world about, he knew, I don't think he knew what the full consequences would be. He knew he'd stepped over the line. I knew I think he knew that he'd probably outdone himself in terms of the way he reacted over in France and things that had happened in his career. I think this was a step further. And I think he was just lost in his own thought about it all. Because he knew there was going to be a big, massive reaction to this. We weren't sure how big, and the club tried to defuse it a little bit by banning him till the end of the season. Don't know whether that preempted the FA to do what they did in banning him for 9 months after the original incident. It is an iconic moment, and again, as I say, it's just one of them ones that you think you have more of an understanding because of what you see, and what we did see go on with Eric behind the scenes.
The club did suspend him to the end of the season. That season, you ended up finishing second. You runners up in the FA Cup, and then you lost to Everton. How big a difference did it make not having him?
I think it's easy to say Eric was the factor, and if we had Eric, we might have done it. But I look back to that West Ham game, the last game of the season, we absolutely battered the door down at West Ham, and it just couldn't get the ball in the back of the net. Would Eric have done that? Possibly. Did we create enough to win 2 football games that day? Definitely. And sometimes it goes for you like that. Borussia Dortmund in '96 in the European Cup semi-final. I had enough chances to win the game over in Dortmund and enough chances to win 3 football games in the game at home against Dortmund, and we lose both games 1-0. Did Eric play in them? Yeah, I think he did. Did we score? No, we didn't. I would never ever put it down to one player. Do you know what I mean? Everybody talks about. I mean, Eric was it the last title in 96, 97, and Eric scored a lot of goals in 1-0 games, and was scored the goal that made the difference to get us the 3 points. What about the guys in the sticks keeping the clean sheet as well? You can't be. You can't win a full football game on your own. So I know it's very hard to judge. What I would say was Eric was a very pivotal player for us, and a wonderful player to play with, and a massive revered player in Manchester United's history. So I'm never going to say that was the difference, because that would be disrespectful to the other players that played in that team. But the guy was a genius, yeah. So
if your team's picked, I give you the chance, then I give all the guests a chance to play a wild card, to play their joker, to pick one player they played against and parachute them into your team to make it better. Is the one player who stands out from the many, many fabulous players you played against for club and country, you think, wow, they make a difference?
I always go back to the player I found, a player I found unplayable on a night, and that was Romario, the Brazilian playing for Barcelona. We played him against him at Old Trafford. We drew 2-2. I think he scored 1 or the 2, I'm not sure which. And then we went to the return leg over in Barcelona, and leading up to the Barcelona game over there, he went AWOL, but went missing from Barcelona and went partying in the Rio Carnival back in Brazil. Story was he came back, got fined heavily, warned about his future conduct, and we played him. The next game was against, so we wondered whether he was going to play. Anyway, they put him in a team. We were hampered by the European rule at the time, so we had to leave Peter Schmeichel out. I think, did we leave? We don't think we left Eric out. I think Sparky was left out. Maybe Andre, something like that. So it wasn't our full team. And he was unplayable. The only time he ever walked off a football pitch and thought I could not get anywhere near him. He was that good. I don't know. I want him drug tested after that game, I think, because he just, there was a moment in time where it just seemed to stand still, and he turned on the ball and he faced me up, and I thought, right, let's see what you got. And the next minute he'd gone past me, and I was like, what happened there? And that one-off performance, I would say, was the best I ever came across. Another guy I think I would have loved to have put in the team was Zidane. I played against him a few times with Juventus, and incredible player for a big bloke. the guile that he had, the way he manipulated the football, his passing, his strength, the way he shielded the ball. You could see why he was such a revered kind of player. So I think it'd be one of them two. And because if he could replicate that performance, I would probably go with Romario.
Not bad choices. To wrap things up then, I always finish by asking guests if there was one thing they could change about their life up until now or their career up until now, what would it be? Is there something you look back on and think, I'd have changed that, I'd have done that differently, or I'd rather that match had gone a different way?
I get asked that a lot of times in things that I do like this and chatting about my career and all that. And I find it very hard to think or to say, I wish that, because at 19, I was going nowhere. Get picked up by Middlesbrough, turn up and play in one of United's most successful periods of time, to play for England, to win the things that I won. For people then to say, is anything you regret? I can't have any regrets for doing what I did. It was something I never thought was possible. So no, I'm a little bit envious, I've got to say, of not staying at Manchester United and winning, because once we won the league, the European Cup is what we set our sights on, to emulate the great United side of '68, and obviously the babes that went before us. So I was a little bit envious when they lifted the cup in '99, but regrets, no, I can't. It's a career that I never thought was possible. To do the things that I did, I never thought was possible. And not just with Manchester United, I had great times, promotions at Middlesbrough. Some fantastic times there, so I couldn't have regrets about the career I had.
Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the show. Fabulous career.
Thank you.
That is the career of Gary Pallister. Fantastic insight into what was a sensational time at the top of the game. And remember, it is never too late for one last match. Goodbye.
Our thanks to this week's guest, Gary Pallister, another top-class team from him. Just a quick reminder to get involved with Who Knows Wins now, the new app that's really shaking up the sports entertainment industry. You can challenge your mates for real money and, more importantly, for bragging rights. This is what Who Knows Wins is all about. Download the app and then you create your league, select your fixtures from whatever you want across football, rugby, tennis or even horse racing, and then you set your entry stake. Your predictions, invite your pals in and challenge them to your guesswork. Grow that pot and win their money. And when it comes to the bragging rights, well then, winner takes all. Get it on the App Store or Google Play now. Who Knows Wins, put your money where your mates are. And while you're downloading it, make sure you rate, review and subscribe to One Last Match, where next week our guest will be former Everton, Bradford, Rangers and Scotland midfielder Stuart McCall. Keep up to date with all the latest from One Last Match on Twitter @OneLastMatch or on Facebook. Just search for One Last Match. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week for One Last Match.
Audio Frontier.